Good morning, everybody. I've been asking this to each of you individually, but I hope all of you got some sleep last night. We got 2 more nights coming up. More importantly, we have the 2 days where we have to, listen to some exciting discussions on some great topics. It gives me a lot of pleasure to welcome you to Bangalore. We are honored to be hosting this event for the first time, and we are looking forward to a great 2 days and also the Sunday excursion thereafter for those of you that will be joining us. So, we will, with this, I will, say that let's get the proceedings started unless anybody has any questions. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and just a couple of housekeeping points. As usual, I'm going to circulate the attendance list, so if you please sign that for our records. I'm also going to circulate a list which comes from our discussions of the Executive Committee meeting yesterday afternoon, when we thought it would be very helpful to have a fairly accurate total of lawyers employed by our various member firms. So I'm also going to circulate another list in which I'd like each of you to put down after your firm's name the number of lawyers working for you, and if you could then also summarize for us those lawyers in what I've listed as the main sectors of work, so corporate and commercial, litigation, employment law, tax, IP and construction. This will help us for marketing purposes, doing presentations, that sort of thing, so that will be really useful. So those two things are now circulate. Can I also just give apologies for absence? There are only 4 firms not represented at this conference. The Israeli firm Noma Flum sent her apologies. Ayash Salama, Denis Salama, his apologies. Anton from Moscow, KIAP, and Domingo Izaguirre from the member firm in Chile. Other than that, all our member firms are represented.
So now I invite Amit Vijat and Vishnu Krishnan for the presentation on behalf of Lexgen. We are very curious.
Good morning, everyone. Hope all of you had a good time yesterday night. I'm Vishnu Chandran. I'm a senior associate at Lexgen, and my co-presenter is Mr. Amit Vyas, our corporate partner. Through this presentation, we would like to familiarize you with our wonderful country and the equally wonderful firm of ours. So this is the Indian national flag, also known as the tricolor, consisting of saffron, white, and green horizontal stripes with the Ashok Chakra in navy blue at the center. India is one of the oldest civilizations in the world. The Indus Valley civilization, which at its peak had several urban settlements, is estimated to be over 5,000 years old. India is also the seventh largest country by area, and with 1.3 billion of us living here, it's the second most populated one. For the purpose of administration, India is divided into 29 states and 7 union territories, with New Delhi being the national capital. And consistent with our federal structure, all of the states are governed by separate governments. One of the much talked about features of India is its diversity. Probably you won't come across another country which is as diverse as ours. Most of our states, for instance, has its own unique languages, festivals, art forms, dance forms, etc. In fact, about 122 languages are spoken in India. For the ease of administration, however, most of the governments stick to Hindi and English for official purposes. We Indians are also racially diverse. While the majority of us are either Indo-Aryans or Dravidians, you could also find a few other races here, like, for instance, Mongoloid race. Also, most of the world religions are practiced here in India. While majority are followers of Hinduism, there is no national religion in India, and the freedom to follow any religion of one's choice is a constitutional right. The Constitution of India declares India to be a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. It also provides for a system of parliamentary democracy at both union and state levels, which means that while the President of India is the official head of the state, it's the Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister that runs the administration. The Constitution also guarantees a few fundamental rights to the citizens. For instance, the right to equality before law, the right to freedom of speech and expression, right to follow any religion of choice, and right to approach the courts for remedies in case of any civil rights violations by the government. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and all other laws made by the Parliament must abide by the Constitution and its principles. Also, the basic structure doctrine expounded by the Supreme Court. The basic structure doctrine expounded by the Supreme Court has ensured that some of the basic features of the Constitution, like secularism, democracy, grant of fundamental rights, cannot be taken away by any government or the Parliament through any amendment of laws. India is the sixth largest economy in the world, and one of the fastest growing one as well. It's also amongst the top 10 destinations for foreign direct investment inflows, which stood at around 62 billion USD last financial year. Some of the sectors which majorly contributes to Indian economy are the information technology sector, telecommunications, infrastructure, etc. Moving to the cultural side, we Indians just love our movies. We in fact produce the most number of movies in a year. While of course Bollywood is the most popular and well-known movie industry, there are several other regional industries in India. Like, for instance, in Karnataka, here we have the sandalwood. India also has a very rich tradition of music and dance forms. The Hindustani and Carnatic music are two classical music forms that originated in India. We also have several classical dance forms like Bharatanatyam, Kuchipudi, Kathak, etc. On top of this, all the states have its own different folk or tribal music and dance forms as well. Having said all that, it's the Bollywood music and dance which is omnipresent and the most popular here in India. Among the sports we follow, cricket is by far the most popular and probably the greatest unifier here in India. It's such is the fan following that for many Indians, it's more akin to a religion than just a sport. Some of the other sports that we follow are football, hockey, badminton, tennis, kabaddi, etc. Lastly, I would like to take you through some of the interesting places that you could consider visiting in India. With spectacular hill stations, yoga camps, scenic trekking trails, the majestic Himalayas is the place to be if you'd like to get away from the hustle and bustle of cities and would like to be at complete peace and tranquility. New Delhi and Agra were the capitals of the Mughal Empire and are studded with several architectural marvels, none more popular than the Taj Mahal. Rajasthan is renowned for its grand palaces, luxury resorts, and desert safari. Goa has some amazing ancient churches, great beaches, and a very vibrant nightlife. The northeastern states of India, also known as the Seven Sisters, is a biodiversity hotspot with lots of national parks and evergreen forests. And Kerala, also known as the God's own country for its natural beauty, has several serene backwaters and renowned Ayurvedic treatment centers and spas. Coming to the city we are in, Bangalore is one of the largest cities in India and the capital of the state of Karnataka. It's also the technology capital of India, with several major IT companies like Infosys, Wipro, some new age unicorns like Flipkart, Ola, and important governmental establishments like the Indian Space Research Organization and the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited being headquartered here. It's also known as the Garden City of India because of its abundant greenery and large public parks like the Cubbon Park and Lal Bagh. So that was India in under 10 minutes for you. Now I would invite Amit to speak about our firm. Thank you.
Thanks, Vishnu. Good morning, everyone. I once again extend a warm welcome to you. I once again extend a warm welcome to all the delegates of LEI Autumn Conference. Lexygen is a combination of two words, lex and oxygen. We intended to be a breath of fresh air in the legal ecosystem and continue to be one even today. Our firm was set up in the year 2006 by Vijay, whom you are all familiar with, Prashant and myself being part of the startup team. We are a 15-member law firm with 3 partners and 12 associates. We are headquartered in Bangalore and have a branch office in Singapore. Our Singapore office focuses primarily on the Southeast region and provides on-the-ground legal assistance with regards to Indian laws and for regional and cross-border transactions. Our practice areas are divided into 2 heads, transactional and non-transactional. In the transactional side, we have a strong focus on the fund formation. We regularly assist our clients with their private equity, venture capital, and M&A deals. Approximately 70% of our time is spent on transactional work. We also have a strong focus on the infrastructure projects, be it ports, roads, or airports. We've done several deals across these verticals. On the non-transactional work, we assist our clients with implementing their India strategy, assistance on day-to-day corporate compliances, and technology regulatory advice. Some of our prime clients are on the PEVC side are Advent International, Harbor Ventures, Partners, Wall Invest, and Sama Capital. Similarly, some of our big corporates are Amazon, Infosys, and Flipkart. We have, in fact, worked on some excellent deals, such as the Asian Genco transaction, where a consortium of investors led by Morgan Stanley made its investment. We have also advised a strategic investor on their acquisition in the Mumbai International Airport and the Bangalore International Airport. Some of the interesting deals we have recently worked on include World Invest's investment in Byju's, a newly minted unicorn, and Insula Vineyards, the largest wine maker in India. We've also advised Mess Mobile, an AI-based company, in its acquisition by American Express. Feedback, either by the client or our team members, is very important to us. Our clients have always appreciated our deal facilitative and business-centric advice. They have always ranked us high on responsiveness. Similarly, our people say we provide a dynamic supportive and friendly environment, and they see transformational growth working with us. Our firm is regularly ranked by most of the industry rankings. With this, we conclude our presentation and would like to thank you for your rapt attention and hope you enjoy the next 2 days of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishnu and Amit. So next on the agenda, we have guest speaker Richard Reiki with us. I'll invite Vijay to give us a quick introduction.
Hi, Richard. Welcome to the LEI conference. Thank you for making time to be here. So I'm going to give a quick introduction about you, and then I'll hand it over to you. So Richard used to head KPMG in India. He was the CEO, and he has had a very, very dynamic and successful stint at KPMG. And even post his retirement, he continues to be on the board of KPMG Dubai. He is a prolific speaker. He has given speeches at multiple venues, quite riveting, as I'm sure you'll find out. And he now also is actively involved in mentoring startups, being in Bangalore. So with that quick introduction, I will hand it over to Richard.
Good morning, everybody. And when I was coming up on the elevator, I met some of the people sitting in this room, and they said it was a difficult night. The first night is always difficult. Having been part of KPMG and traveled, I was on the global board of KPMG, and so traveling, I know what it means. The first day is always the toughest. And the first session is going to be really tough to keep you guys awake. Because I don't know which time zone you are now, whether you are in your sleep zone or whichever one you are in. But, economy is not exactly the most exciting topic to be talking about, especially in today's time when the challenges that the world is facing and the global economy is going through. But let me try and see, so the best way to ensure that you are engaged into this presentation, may I request you that you don't need to wait for me to finish my presentation. Any of the slides you feel you want to ask a question, please put up your hand and feel free to ask. We can move it from a monologue to a dialogue. And in that way, I think you'll get much more out of this time that I'm going to spend here with you all. I've been speaking on the Indian economy for a very long time, actually, and I've been speaking on various forums. So the understanding of the economy is pretty good of from where we are coming and where we are going to go, and also our connect to the global economy and where India possibly is going to go into the future. You would have read somewhere, India today is like a 2.5 trillion economy. Ambition is, can it become a 10 trillion economy by 2030? 12 years from now, can it become a 10 trillion? 2.5 to 10 trillion is like a big ask. But if I remember when we used to make our budgets and our strategy, we said, okay, forget about all the problems and challenges you have. You have a white paper. If you have to write it, could you do it? And we can deal with the challenges as we come. So I just want to tell you, India is a very aspirational country. And for you who have coming for the first time, when you go around, you will be able to see the first presentation was pretty good, showing the color, the life of India, the multicultural. India is, for you, one country. But India is not one country. It is like Europe, actually. Because you go to any part of India, so if English was not a binding language across the country, personally, I would have been foreign in India myself. Though I've been born, brought up, lived here all my life. I would have been foreign in my own country because if I come to, say, in Karnataka, they'll speak the Kannada language, I'll not understand it, and you'll be lost. You go to Tamil, you go to different parts of the world, will be different languages. So India is actually like a United States of Europe, if you call it. So it is, each state is very different. Food, language, clothes they wear. So all corporates that came into India, when India opened up in 91 to, I would say, 97, 98, you saw the maximum calamities, I would say, of large multinational companies, very successful globally, came and hit a roadblock in India. And some of them went back with bad experiences, some of them went back with learnings. The smarter ones did it the right way, and they made the money out of it. Because they didn't understand this one concept. There is no one India. So if you're going to market in North India, there's a different marketing strategy. You market in South India, there's an absolute different market. I just want to put this in context to you so that when you talk about India, it's just not one country. So this is what is happening on the global side. We are having a huge amount of, I would say, interesting times. Because the way I see it, we are going to have disruption over the next 5 to 6 years, or maybe more, maybe 7, 8, 9 years. There is going to be global disruption. Because globalization, which actually, many people said successful, some are saying not so successful, but I'm sure countries like China and India benefited the most from globalization. Because, and also the multinationals, they got new markets, they came out with very different models. So globalization worked. But today, with every leader that is there for each country, moving to a very nationalist, nation state kind of move, globalization is unwinding. We're going to get a new form. I don't know what it's going to be. There are going to be new alignments, global alignments. The latest you would have seen the US-China trade war, which is escalating, and it's not just US and China that are going to get impacted by it, but I think the entire globe is going to get impacted by it. But in the bargain, new things are going to emerge, new ways of doing business are going to emerge. I think tomorrow you have some sessions on artificial intelligence. Yes, we keep hearing about artificial intelligence, we keep hearing about new technology, we keep hearing about blockchain, but I don't know how many of us actually understand the power of artificial intelligence and blockchain, how it is going to redefine how business is going to be done. And there's another one which is coming down, which got defined in the World Economic Forum, which is called the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is automation in the manufacturing sector. In fact, that one big change is going to put a level playing field for every country. So you can't say, okay, I'm Europe, so I was the leader, or I was America, I was the leader. This fourth industrial revolution is going to be whichever country is smart enough to choose a technology which is relevant for them, or choose a multiple of technologies relevant for them, and actually implement it. I was in China a few months back, and I saw the way they've implemented artificial intelligence. It's mind-blowing. And today I was reading the newspaper, we keep talking of Tesla, but I'd gone and met the NIO people, and you see now NIO was the one which electric cars, they are coming on their own. So where it is going, we don't know. We heard in the opening presentation, 5,000 years, India's civilization was there. It was Asia which used to dominate the world. India and China had the maximum GDP share. Suddenly it's fallen to almost whatever. And is the re-emergence of Asia taking place? So this is on the global side. I mean, this slide can say a few more things out there, but this is what on the global scenario that is happening. And in that context, what is India going to do in terms of its own success, in terms of dealing with the challenges as it comes here? One of the big issues, or one of the big things that are going to come up, is this demographic dynamics that are going to take place. So in India, when you'll keep hearing this word demographic dividend. In my view, it is a miscoined word. There is a demographic dynamics that are going to take place, because this demographic dividend can become a disadvantage if that entire population is not educated, it is not skilled, and there is not enough medical facilities. And you look at countries like India, that's our biggest challenge. Our biggest challenge today is skilling these people, because everybody who goes into the schooling system, I'm talking the entire country, rural, urban, everywhere, 85% is the dropout rate. If 85% is the dropout rate, what do you do with this 85%? How do you skill them? And that's could be one of the most challenging kind of this thing that's going to happen. So, and Africa is emerging. Africa is definitely emerging as a economic power. They say, I've read somewhere saying that is it the final destination where global companies are going to go? So Africa has got its own opportunities there. You just saw in that opening presentation saying that India has grown 8.2% GDP. I don't think we should get too excited about it, because my view, while We have regained our status of 8.2. I'm not sure how sustainable it is going to be in the medium term. Forget about long term, even in the medium term, because there was a blip at that time and we actually took advantage of it. But India is growing fast, irrespective of 8.2. I think we will be in the 7% range of growth where the Indian economy will go. So here's the slide which talks of, and these are all global leaders who talk about us. India will be the base of the economic pole of global growth over the coming decade. The challenge which comes up in 2008, when the global financial crisis took place, China bailed out the world. China in many ways bailed out the world at that time. China is now stagnating. It will not be able to bail out. If we have another crisis of the like that we had in 2008, and we keep hearing about it, that another crisis is around the corner, and if that comes, which country is going to bail it out? Which country is going to bail out the world? We don't know. And so that is going to be a big challenge that we're going to look at. Some of the points that I want to make out here, India's is a consumption-driven economy. India is a consumption-driven economy. 66% of GDP comes from private consumption. So as long as we continue to remain a consumption-driven economy, and our savings rates are not bad, even after having 66% of GDP, as our saving rates are about 30%. Our debt to GDP is one of the lowest, or is in par. It's about 66% now, so it is not out of the park yet. So debt to GDP is also in control. The point I want to make out here, the point I'm trying to make out is India has got very strong macro fundamentals, which will see it through the next few years. So whatever bumps come in the global economy, whatever hits we keep seeing, we're seeing a falling rupee today. We are seeing rising oil prices in India because we import most of our oil. And the petrol, so you go and speak to an average Indian on the road and ask him, is he happy? I mean, he's paying a lot of money for filling gas into his car. So petrol prices are high, the dollar to rupee is falling, and that gets spoken about. The other one doesn't get spoken about is euro. Other day I was sitting with some guy in the plane and he said he had to take some euros and it's gone up so much and nobody talks about it. But we have a challenge on our currency. We have a challenge on our currency, having some hits. And on one side, it's an advantage because the firms which are doing export will gain more rupees, so they'll be more profitable. But for our imports, it's because our import bill on oil is very high. And that is where our the current account deficit has gone up all-time high. And that is worrying. That's worrying because that will also impact the fiscal deficit at some point of time. And so if you see, the government has now come out with 19 items on which they have increased the customs duty. And you have all individuals. It's very strange. I saw that 19, they said non-essential items. So sometimes you find governments operate in a very strange way. On one side, we are building these huge airports all over India, connecting India together, and then we take a 5% increase of duty on aviation fuel. The airline industry is already in doldrums in India. They are down. I mean, you fly them, you realize they are in doldrums. And then you have a 5% increase. They will not be able to pass on this price increase to all the customers. So you're going to see a further challenge around there on that. So, like I told you, savings 30%, so that we will be fine on that. So now few statistics on what India will go on to become. India is today, will hopefully by 2020 be the largest aviation market. Will be the third highest aviation market and largest by 2030. So it's good to put these figures in the future, so nobody can go and challenge it and say, okay, 2030 who has seen? So I can come and say 2030, yes, we are going to be the largest aviation market. Today, by 2025, we should be the third largest consumer market. So there are two markets which all consumer product companies look very, maybe third, Indonesia, we can add to it. China, India, and Indonesia are the three large markets that people, of course, US is there, which is a big consumption market, but amongst the emerging markets, and if you have to believe Donald Trump, he says US also is an emerging market. And we will become amongst the top 5 industrial manufacturing nations. Today, if you look at our GDP component, 60% comes out of services, little over 60%. And then you've got 25% coming out of industrials and about 18% coming out of agricultural sector. That, in my view, is a very lopsided way in which our economy has grown, but it's grown and it is sustained till now. So, I mean, you got economists coming and saying that this model is not going to work, India will collapse. India is still not collapsed. But the challenge we have, the agricultural sector, which contributes 18% to the GDP, has 60% of the population living off that 18%. That's the challenge. And the challenge is because these people do not have good opportunities in rural, there is a migration happening to the cities. And if you don't build enough new cities, the current cities will become slums. Some of it you're seeing when you drive down the roads of Bangalore. Bangalore was a city which exploded. It was a home for retirement people actually at one point of time. So people who used to retire used to come and live in Bangalore, good weather, nice houses.
I had a question about the point you made about the GDP split of India, with the lion's share being held by services. And I agree with you that's maybe skewed. So do you see programs like Make in India leveling that ratio in the next 5 to 10 years? Or do you think that we are going to continue to be a largely services-driven economy?
My view is India should continue to be a largely services-dominated industry for a very simple reason. And we should not feel shy of it. This is my personal view. I'm talking, economists are saying it's lopsided. I don't say it. The only thing which is worrying to me is the 18% in agriculture. So we need to find alternate employment. We need to find alternate employment for people in the rural sector. We need to find jobs other than land, other than agriculture for the rural sector. And we need to create some kind of business activity which it goes on there. See, the other point which I want to leave here, because you'll never hear this anywhere. India has a huge arts and craft industry, which in my view is undervalued and not even valued for that purpose. Because these are people from very poor families, but they have that skill which has come down from generations. And those people are dying because they're not getting enough money. The youngsters of that families are moving out of that. I was just thinking that if a private equity had to come to value the arts and craft industry in India, I don't know how much value they would have put to it and said how many $1 trillion it would be, just the arts and craft industry. Because this art, the skills that these people have is across the country, but they're all sitting in rural, semi-urban part of the world. Now there is one industrial house which is now taking it on themselves of trying to revive this, but it's too small for one just industrial house. So somebody has to see value in it and say that how do you get it? Now that's the big opportunity for rural India. In my view, that could be a really big opportunity because what these people need is a market access. They need financing, they need market access, and we've got technology now to help us. We've got technology to help us. We have got a number of e-commerce companies. These guys can get onto those e-commerce platforms, but they need to be made aware of it. So there has to be somebody has to go and mentor them. Somebody has to go and look at them. On the rural side, the big challenges we have, after so many years, we still depend upon weather. If there's no rainfall, we'll have a problem in the agriculture sector. That poor farmer is gone. He's finished. Suicides happen because he can't pay back his debts. Because he's dependent upon that crop fails. He can't pay back his debt. What does he do? And he, being an honest guy, cannot face the world, commit suicide. So these are the challenges of this country. And somebody should take it up. So we have to work in many ways of making huge investments And that will have to be done by the government. It can't be done by private sector. The private sector will always look for returns. Will have to be done by the government to get into drip irrigation in a big way, make the lands more productive, get, we had a green revolution in India, which actually made India from a food shortage country into a food surplus country. But what India can actually become is the granary to the world. If we are able to get the production on the productivity improved. We are very poor. I don't have the statistics with me, but we are so poor when we compare to the European countries. We are just down right at the rock bottom, and they need to be improved because these guys don't have money to put in. Secondly, they're growing the wrong crops. They're growing crops which are sucking water, and there's a water shortage in this country. They are not got into the, I would say, multicolored revolution now. You don't need to get into the green revolution, you have to get into a multicolored revolution where you start growing other agricultural products other than the main grains that they have been growing. So, India has a lot of technology adoption has taken place. We're going to have 730 internet users. We're the largest mobile market in the world. Or the second largest mobile market in the world. But if you look at it, India leapfrogged in telecom from landline to the latest in mobile. There was no middle path for us. And actually, if you ask me, the 1.2 billion connections of mobile phones in people's hands is the power of this economy. The challenge is, how do you convert that take that 1.2 billion phones from just the normal phones into smartphones, and once you get it, you'll get e-commerce going right across this country. Because it was realized that when smartphone came in, people were not buying, they were using their mobiles. There's a big mobile adoption in this country. And a new operator has come in called Jio. You may have heard of it, Reliance Jio. They have completely changed the landscape of this, the way mobile has come in. At some other time, one can say how they structured themselves. But in my view, possibly in the next few years, they will become the most highly valued telecom company in the world, not just India, because their structure is so perfect and the kind of penetration that they've got, and they will become the go-to telecom company for the world to see how you put up a telecom company in such a short span of time and get so many users onto your network. And because they went for the bottom of the pyramid and they did it right. And I think the success is there to be seen, how they're going to connect that telecom to the payment system, to their retail. Reliance has already made a statement that we will become the largest retail e-commerce company in India. Bold statement to make when Walmart is here and Amazon is in India. But they have gone ahead and said we're going to do this, and a few days after they made that statement, you read another news. Alibaba ties up with Reliance for e-commerce, willing to invest 5 billion along with Reliance. So you're seeing that game getting played out there. The dynamics are going to change, how that game is going to get played. So smart Indian business models, smart Indian business leaders will actually emerge out of this, what we are talking about. I spoke about the fourth, if you drive around India, the one big challenge you'll see is infrastructure. You must be wondering which third world country have I come to, other than the airports. I remember we used to have airports, the airports which you landed in, okay, you've come to Bangalore, but if you go to Mumbai and Delhi, the airports are far superior than even Bangalore from that point, but Bangalore's not bad. One of our, I remember when I was a few years back, before these airports came up, one of our board members who was from France, he said, when I got on the plane, I thought I got into the wrong country, because he got into the new airport and he was used to seeing that dirty airport, and then suddenly he gets into this spanky new airport. So we are very proud of our airports, actually. We are proud of a lot of the infrastructure. On the port side, we've done a lot on the infrastructure side. A lot of good work has happened. India's got some really good ports. What India has not done well, has not used their inland waterways for transportation. Because we are the most expensive logistics, one of the most expensive logistics countries in the world. To move goods from one place, we have to use road or we have to use rail. We never used water, but now if you look at the government's entire now thing is, how do I get the waterways? I'll just give you one small example. I was the chief minister of a new state which we formed, maybe the 29th state, Andhra Pradesh, which got formed. And he's got a 1,000 kilometer coastline. And he's saying that if I have a look east policy, because he's facing the east, 1,000 kilometers of coastline, the water, inland waterways coming through his thing, he can actually transport to the world using waterways and transport internal using waterways, and it would completely cut down the cost. So what he needs to do is create what China did, was create these manufacturing economic zones along the coastline and do import-export, and he can get away with it. So we are seeing a lot of that happening. We are finding new trade routes opening up. We are finding all those happening, which will have their impact going into the future. So what are the 5 big trends that are going to happen in India? Some of them I've spoken, but let me reiterate some of them. One is this consumption story, which I spoke about. So it is expected that per household consumption is going to achieve US dollars 10,000 by 2030. Today, India's per person GDP is about $2,000, $1,900. So it's very poor. So when we talk of ourselves, we always say purchasing power parity. We are the 3rd largest economy, but we are the 6th or 7th largest economy if you just go by nominal growth and percentage that we have. Our reform agenda is very big. You may have heard of the GST, the goods and service tax, which India implemented. When you know the country is so complicated, and then to go and introduce a tax of that this thing, because earlier when goods moved, and why I call it the United States of Europe is because every time a good has to move from one state to another state, there was big checks getting done. So you had to move some truck from Delhi to Bombay, it would take 14 days. Okay, and look at the cost, 14 days to move. But now with the seamless borders, with GST coming in, now no trucks get stopped at any border. You have that form, you just drive through. So that has saved a huge amount of this thing. Secondly, you may have heard of the India parallel economy, the black economy as we call it here, which is the sector which actually deals, which is not accounted into the GDP. But in my view, it actually contributes to the GDP because black money is not black throughout. It becomes black, white, whatever, as depends on whose hand it goes in, and it keeps changing color. So that definitely also contributed to the GDP. But GST has actually brought a lot of these people who were outside the ecosystem into the ecosystem. So GST has done 2 things. Because input credit, you won't get input credit if you're not on the formal system. Your goods become more expensive. So if you want to sell your goods at the right price, you got to get into GST, this thing, otherwise you will be out of that system. Yes, we have had our challenges in GST implementation. A country as large as this will have challenges. They are working on it. Maybe we all business leaders would say they should have worked much faster. But I'm sure the next 2 to 3 years, GST will settle down and India will actually get the true benefits out of GST. So one would see a lot of things happening on that side. The other one was smart cities. You would have heard the Prime Minister's announcement. We want to create 100 smart cities. Very ambitious program, costs a lot of money. It's going to have some challenges around implementing it, but let's see how it goes. So at the moment, the one big project that the government is working is on housing for all. Because a lot of people in India don't even have houses. So you are seeing the privileged people who are living, you live here. But when you go down for 30 kilometers, 40 kilometers into urban, you will find that there are a lot of challenges there. So he's come with the project Housing for All, which encouraging cheap houses to be built. Everybody can own a house. And there is a definite this thing by the Prime Minister that every Indian should have a house. I mean, that's his ambition, and it's not way out into the future, next 10 years. He wants every Indian should have a house, and that is being done by giving land to some of these builders and construction people to build the houses out. Transportation, logistics, ports, we are getting these industrial corridors, which I'll talk about in the next few slides. And of course, our digital revolution that is happening in India. The digital revolution has, in many ways, changed the way India operates completely because of the mobile connections we have and all the e-commerce companies. We've got a number of unicorns. I mean, you saw on that slide saying Flipkart and others. I mean, these are very highly, Flipkart is today taken over by Walmart. And they paid some 17 billion or 16 billion dollars for that e-commerce company. So we have got a number of e-commerce companies operating in India, and actually the ecosystem is very, very large. If you take the logistics and the delivery people also, you put it out there. So just go into some of the major reforms. Goods and service tax, I've already spoken about. I will not talk about it anymore. We have also brought out what we call the insolvency and bankruptcy code. This will be very interesting to you as lawyers. This is a code because India has got a huge problem of non-performing assets on the balance sheets of number of banks. So what we have, what we call is a twin balance sheet problem. The banks have lent, they're not getting their money back. The corporate who borrowed that money has borrowed so much above his debt to equity ratio. If we look at it, he can't borrow anything more. So we have a twin balance sheet problem sitting in India, where you've got the banks who can't lend because they've borrowed, they have lent to people who are not paying back. So this NPA has gone to very enormous proportions. So that's how this insolvency and bankruptcy code came up, is to clean up this entire system, take the write-downs in a way which you can then start moving. In fact, Europe was very smart. Europe, post the 2008, actually cleaned up the entire banking system, and they are seeing the advantage of it now. Because once the banking system gets cleaned up, you could go, India was slow in it. India did not go around cleaning the banking system. We have now woken up to it. Yes, Vijay will also say that a lot of things have to be done on the IBC. A lot of clarifications need to be still worked out to make it much more smoother. But we are seeing green shoots out here. And I think this is going to be a big kind of helping the Indian economy grow. If we talk of foreign direct investment, you saw $66 billion came in last year into as FDI. I think India is today one of the largest thing of FDI, and possibly in the world. I think we have the most friendly FDI policy. There's literally, you can actually come and set up a business anywhere. There are very few restrictions. Earlier, there were few places where you could start a business. Today, it's moved the other way around, where they are allowing businesses to move differently. Other than law firms, international law firms coming to India, similarly international accounting firms. So if you ask me as KPMG, I'm illegal in this country. I can't do audits, I can't sign as KPMG. So I had to put up a local Indian firm with no KPMG name on it, and do the audits for regulated business. So KPMG can do consulting work. So suddenly the government has realized that all these consulting firms in India are not being regulated because there's no regulation. Because we're outside the net, they don't allow you. So all the big four accounting firms have domestic accounting firms which actually do the regulated business, whether it's tax or audit. And of course, law firms is still a challenge. I think they've started slowly liberalizing, but it's going to take a long time. So we had some FDI liberalization happening in single brand retail. I mean, nowhere in the world you'll hear of multi-brand retail and single brand retail. India coined this new word called single brand retail and multi-brand retail. If you take a company like Marks and Spencer's, it's a multi-brand retail, or you take any of these departmental stores, Walmart will be a multi-brand retail. So single brand retail, they allowed it, and today, after thanks to, IKEA has come into India, they've opened their first store. They are seeing of course, they were cribbing the other, I saw in the newspaper, they were saying this customs duty is going to impact them because they're importing a lot of their furniture from outside India. So that increase in custom duty on furniture is definitely going to impact them and their pricing in India. So the World Bank ranks countries. I'm not sure I completely trust this ranking personally, because the way they rank it, the kind of questionnaires they put in and everything else. But the good news for India is that we are now on 100 on the ranking. And in the last 1 year, we fell by 30 steps. We improved by 30 steps on the World Bank ranking. Obviously, because we brought in reforms. And if you see the second part of the slide, which is on your right-hand side, India is one of the top reformers, according to the World Bank, and highest number of indicators in which a single country has been recognized for reforms. So, the reform agenda of this current government has paid off in many ways. And this is testimony to that on the World Bank ranking. And it is important because when global investors look at India, they do look at the World Bank ranking. Just to let you know, we as KPMG were very much involved in helping the government on ease of doing business. We were very, very closely involved in that program. We worked with them for almost 3-4 years across state governments. In fact, India also doesn't only have the World Bank ranking where we do. We also brought in one thing where KPMG worked with the government on putting state-wise rankings. So we started rating the states against each other. So we brought a competitive spirit into the country. The one point I want to leave out here, so when you look at all this talks of central government. If you have to set up an industry or business in India, you have to deal with 3 agencies. Central government, state government, depends which state you're going, so central, one side, then the state has to give you the permissions, and then you have local bodies, the municipalities, etc., who need to give you certain permissions. So it is so the vision of all the 3 have to be aligned to make it work. The central, the state, and the municipal bodies all need to talk. So when you talk of India, we need to understand these are the 3 challenges. It's not one government, it's not one permission that we look at, we need to look at. So that is an important point I thought I'd leave behind with you. This is the one which Vijay was asking about, Make in India. So Make in India, along with the 4th industrial, just to share with you, World Economic Forum has put up a center in India for 4th industrial revolution. So India is going to be doing some deep research in this matter, which is going to move on the manufacturing and the agricultural sector, and how you're going to bring in these new technologies, whether it is 3D printing, whether it's robotics, whether it is drones, and to see how this can actually work for the country in a very, very different way. So that has just been set up. And so we will see a lot of work actually happening, and the country should benefit out of it. But the Make in India is a program where it was said that the manufacturing sector, which contributes about 15% of our GDP, so industrial contributes 25, around 25, but the manufacturing only contributes 15, to take manufacturing from 15 to 25. That was the aim. Now, if they can get that, obviously that will also, because manufacturing does encourage a lot of employment. So it creates indirect, direct employment. It also, gets you to produce certain goods which you normally import. And I think with the nation state concept coming in, I think it is going to be all the more important that this concept is actually moved in. The other one is Digital India, trying to make it a much more digital economy. The maximum number of, in fact, we got into the Guinness's Book of World Records. In 1 week, we had opened, I don't remember, 18 million bank accounts, or maybe it could be more. My memory is not this thing on it. But we've opened 321 million new accounts. And this was the government's thing of trying to get, and the reason why these accounts are opened, because India possibly nowhere in the world, let me repeat myself, has it ever been attempted to get a unique identification number put on so many people. We got 1.2 billion people who now have a unique identification number. It is possibly the largest digital, I would say, transformation anywhere taken place in the world. So all of us, all the Indians sitting in this room, will have what we call an Aadhaar card, which is our biometrics, iris scan, everything there, which gives you a unique identification of yourself. So 1.2 billion, it could be a little more than that now, who have got a unique identification number, and now it will be seeing, and also India on the side of it, India has built their own technology stack. This Aadhaar got built on that technology stack which was built in India. And it was led by a guy called Nandan Nelankani, who used to be the CEO of Infosys, who then worked with the government, was appointed by the government at a cabinet rank, and he oversaw this entire project and implementation. So it's got unique advantages. So what it was actually formed for the poor people, when money was being transferred by the government to them, direct benefit transfer, that money was not reaching them because there were middlemen on the way who were taking away part of that money or a lot of that money. So this bank account getting opened and this Aadhaar thing being linked, you could now directly transfer the full money to that individual's bank account. Now that creates business sense because it also helps your consumption. Because the more you spread wealth, the more consumption will go up and it will go. So the financial inclusion has been a big success of this government, where they've got a lot of people actually who have come into the main financial banking system. And of course, the smart cities mission, which the Prime Minister launched, and which is also now got some 980 Indian rupees, of course, billion approved for development of 100 cities. So, and also upgrading of 500 other cities. So we are seeing a lot of action from this government on trying to improve that. Now, a few more advantages of India. This is, we spoke about, I just briefly touched on it, industrial corridors. So what are they creating? They're creating these dedicated freight corridors. So Delhi, Mumbai, I told you 14 days for a truck to leave. Once this dedicated freight corridor comes out, it'll be 1 day. That's the speed at which, because this is a dedicated freight corridor. Along those freight corridors, looking at building new cities, and this is one freight corridor I'm talking of. There are multiple, thank you. There are multiple freight corridors which are come across the country. There are some linked with Bangalore and on the other side, east side with Calcutta. But the freight corridor is just not a freight corridor. Industry is going to be put along it. New cities are going to come up. So it is a big, massive project that is being undertaken in India. And hopefully this will also create its own kind of advantages as we are growing. So India is looking to themselves as the regional hub for this region. If you look at this whole thing which started a few years back, called this BIMSTEC, which Cambodia actually got this added later on. This is Bangladesh, India, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Bhutan, Nepal. They have signed up, and this economy is actually, it's not 2.5 trillion, it's 3.5 trillion. If you take all these economies together, they are 3.5 trillion. They're going to see how they're going to improve trade and between each other. There's another one which is there, which is Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Vietnam, where India is trying to strengthen the connectivity with this country. On the other one, they have created a route between Iran, India, Afghanistan, sea route, which will again bring the cost down. So there are a few of these things which will help India as we do the Make in India program and make it a manufacturing hub to make it go through. So these are all the good stories on India. Now, what are the challenges? So, because we don't live in an island, which is where we have to, survive. So, a lot of these global events are affecting us. For example, monetary policy normalization. We just saw the Fed increase the rate again. Now, this is going to have an impact on the dollar rupee. Will further impact it, weaken the rupee. Oil price volatility is something which is going to impact India in a very big way. We got a huge advantage when the oil prices fell to $30. Yes, many countries suffered, like Russia, the Middle East, and all the oil-producing countries. But I think with $80, I think they are now, those economies also are strengthening. India is going to have some big challenges. The global trade war between US and China. My personal view in this global trade war, China is going to be more impacted than the US, but time will tell, so let's not make predictions out here. But this trade war is going to have ramifications right across the world. Right across the world. It's going to have huge ramifications because people will find new global alignment partners. You're going to find new global things getting created. And China, with its one belt, one road investments that they have made, where that will go and see and where that will go, again, I said, it's going to play out. Geopolitics, Middle East tensions continue, North Korea, denuclearization pledge, will it really happen? Or is it something that we are going to just think it's going to happen? Now, these are the domestic challenges. One is labor reforms. Huge problem in this country. Actually, if the labor reforms take place, we will add 1% to our GDP straight away. There is no question about it. So this government is not willing to do. It's an election issue. So no government really wants to touch it. And you know, elections are around the corner in India. 2019, we're going to have our general. I'll talk about that in a little while. And then we have land reforms, which is again a big issue. There are few states have taken it up and done certain things, but land reforms is a big challenge. NPA, non-performing assets, big challenge for this country. And skilling. 80% of the engineering graduates. So while you will see numbers on India that we take out so many engineering graduates and so much, 80% of these engineering graduates lack key skills for employment. This is a big challenge in this country. So it's not about volume, it is about how do you get the quality back again. And we got a very monsoon dependent agricultural sector. I'll add two more points to this which I did not put on the slide. One is India still has big challenges on corruption. Very big challenges on corruption. This still continues. The Prime Minister has been trying to fight on it, but it continues. You talk to business leaders, it is a huge challenge. And the other challenge India has is bureaucracy. Our bureaucracy is something which actually slows down. So whatever vision you may put as a leader and say, this is where I want to take the country, you have the bureaucracy coming and saying, we are not going to play with it. Now I've come to my last slide, which is the political environment. So today we have a right government, a BJP-led government at the center. After 30 years, India got a government which came on their own majority. So they had the biggest advantage of making whatever reforms they wanted because they were in majority and they didn't need to consult anybody to actually get it done, and they could have moved. Some things got done, some did not. A report card will always get made, depends which side of the fence you're sitting. So basically now the predictions going into 19, is it going to be a BJP-led government again, or a BJP majority government coming in again? Or is it going to be a BJP minority government along with alliance partners coming in? Or the third thing is that where the opposition, united by the Congress, which was the earlier party that ran the country 10 years before this, coming back and staking its claim. The jury's still out on it. We don't know where it's going to go. We are living in very challenging times. But the one thing I can tell you, never, we have had so many changes of governments over the since 91. Never has the economic policy wavered. So the macroeconomics, the economic policies will continue the way they are irrespective of which government comes into power. India is on a path of growth. India is on a path of being a very attractive investment destination. It has some very good legal frameworks, which you all will discuss across your day, where we have got very sound corporate governance, legal system, banking sector. You know, everything is pretty sound from the institutional point of view. It is also a great market. So people make a lot of profit here. Somebody done a research. Indian companies on an average, the mid-sector Indian companies give better returns than anybody in the globe give in their relevant sector. And they have been consistently giving a 15% return over the last few years. So I think from a business point of view also, India makes an attractive destination despite the challenges which I spoke about. Yes, they are big challenges and people need to understand it, to navigate it through in this country. So with that, I finish my presentation and thank you for listening to me, and I'm now open to any questions that you may have around the Indian economy. Very happy to answer it. Yeah. 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 So you are absolutely right. If you take the 29 states, we have the Bimaru states, what we call Bihar, UP and others, which are lagging behind. Some of the big states, UP is our biggest state, by the way, by land mass. And it is one of the states that is lagging behind on this economic development. They have not taken advantage, and you find a lot of things you keep reading in the papers about crime, rapes, etc. It's a manifestation of unemployment and, you know, things which come out there, education system. So if you look at some of the forward-looking states, it will be Karnataka, one of the states where you are now, Bangalore, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, the new states of Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, very forward-looking states. So we've got a few of these states which are very, very forward-looking, and they are actually pulling the economy up, but there are a number of them which are laggards. But this ranking, what has happened in the state ranking, which we got done, and we were bold enough at that time as KPMG to put our name on that report, because Global had said, you don't put your name on that report because you will create governments which will go against you, state governments obviously. But we found it the other way around. The state governments came to us and said, can you advise us, how can we improve our ranking? So, so I think because I don't know, at some point Vijay may tell you, we do a lot of investment promotion, the various states do, and they go outside India, within India, to try to get business to come in. And because of that, they have brought a lot of reforms into their state. But saying that, there are a number of states which are laggards. So when anybody is looking at India, the one question you have to ask is not India. Do you want to go to Maharashtra? Do you want to go to Gujarat? Do you want to go to, and then look at the state ranking of that state and then decide, okay, is the raw material available? Is the market available, etc. So when you're looking at India, it has to be very specific to the state, what kind of incentives they will give you, or what kind of policies they have, and how business friendly are they. So you're right, it's a bag, it's a mixed bag. Yeah. Yeah, I can hear you.
Forgive me if I miss some of the,
Sure.
or ask compound questions, but you're saying that it sounds like the nominal GDP rate was 8.2%, which is extraordinarily high. I assume the real GDP is much lower, and I assume the per capita GDP is probably pretty low given the population rate. So that set of thoughts. And another set of thoughts is you kept saying that the government needs to take more of an involvement. Yet at the same time, it seems like consumption as a percentage of GDP is in the high 60s, 66%, which is, I'm from the US, and that's kind of where the consumption as GDP is in my country, but my country is a very mature economy. So I would think, so what's intuitive to me, and you also talked about a lot of the need for FDI and other sort of infrastructure involvement. So it's just not intuitive to me that the government is taking enough of a role, because I would, or FDI is taking enough of a role, because I would expect the investment as a percentage of GDP to be much higher than it is now. I would expect it to be almost like in the China level in the 50s as percent. So it was just surprising to me to hear some of the statistics.
Yeah, so India is, okay, just to answer the first question, 8.2% is a real GDP. It's not a notional figure. But the point I'm saying, that was only for one quarter. So we will, while we get very enamored with this 8.2%, it will get leveled out. And in my view, it will be in the 7% range, the GDP, and that will be the real GDP growth for India. Of course, the government has ambitions to take it 8 and even double digit, which will not be easy, honestly, in the current economic scenario in which we live. But taking your consumption, when I'm talking that consumption 60%, that is your private consumption, which is 60% of GDP. It's not government consumption, it is private consumption. And India has always been, since we opened up in 91, has been a consumption-led economy. We have not been an investment-led economy. Unlike China, and which was very export-oriented, India's exports are very small compared to our, it's all domestic consumption. So we do need the export market. We want the export market, but we are having challenges around exports. So I think where I'm talking of the government intervention coming is in some of the more regulatory changes, making it more easy for people to do business. Because on one side, on paper, everything may look very nice, but when somebody goes to set up an industry, the on-the-ground challenges also need to get dealt with. And that is coming from the point I made. There is a central government, there is a state government, and there are local bodies. You got to take permissions across all three. You can't just get central government tick, and then you have a state government issue coming up here. I'll give you a simple example. IKEA, when they were looking at India, they didn't want to set up their store in Hyderabad, not by choice. But that was the one state government which came to them and gave them the land and gave them all the permissions to come in there. They would ideally like to have it in Mumbai, they would ideally like to have it in Delhi, they would ideally like to have it in Bangalore, but now they have bought their lands in these different, but it's going to take another 5-6 years before they come up. The point and issue is that state governments need to also play their role in attracting investments and making it easy for corporates, multinationals to come in here. So, just to share one very important point with you all, earlier the India stock market was very dependent upon foreign institutional investors. Today, we don't depend upon foreign institutional investors at all. Domestic investments are so large into the stock market today. Foreign institutional investor can take out all their money. Nothing is going to happen to the stock market. It will remain there. So we have moved from being very, very dependent on foreign institutional investors to domestic. Okay, you may say domestic investors, why? Real estate market is down, so everybody is in the stock market. So there are various reasons. There are pulls and pressures which are coming, but today as I talk to you, the amount of money that goes into mutual funds from people like me and Vijay is much larger than what it used to be earlier. So I think from that point of view, there's a steadiness of the flow of funds into the stock market today. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I wondered what you meant by labor reform is my first question. And then the second question is, this is a much longer range focus, I suppose, than most of your presentation, but how do you think about climate change impacting everything that you discussed?
Yeah, true. So the first one on labor reforms, in India, it is very difficult to fire people once you get them on board. In factories, when you hire somebody, it goes to the labor commissioner and it almost becomes impossible to get rid of them. So that is the first thing on labor. So what industry is saying, can we make it easy? Can we give them a severance package and can we move on with it? So that is something that is, you need to take various permissions. So it is not anymore a business decision. It has to go to the government, and government will say, no, we won't allow you to do it. So you have to continue with these people. So that is the challenge on labor reforms. Climate change is a big problem in this country. Let me tell you, it's a big problem in this country. And yes, we are a growing economy. Climate change was never spoken about when the Western world grew. So I'm not taking any defense in it. But today, now that you know it, you need to move into the new technologies and the new way of doing business. But it is going to be a big challenge for India because the cost is too high. And I'm not sure we will be able to take that cost and pick it up. I mean, that's my personal point of view. And it is going to be a slow process. It is going to be, government is aware of it. Prime Minister has made a commitment at Paris that he wants to reduce it. But there are challenges which he will face here.
You mentioned demographic time bomb and the challenge of moving 18% of the agriculture as a percentage of the GDP, yet 60% of the people.
Yeah.
So, and you also talked about the Europe metaphor. So that would imply that there's free movement of people. So somebody can move from the farm into the country. In my country, that urbanization going from 70% of the population to now 3% took 100 years.
Correct.
But at the same time, India has incredible technology, so you'd think that would make people more productive and make it easier to move. But I'm just wondering, you also said, just building on some of your comments, you also said how there are regional differences. So I'm wondering how, like in America, car worker gets laid off in Detroit and they move to Arizona and get another job. So I'm just wondering, but because they speak the same language, there's no cultural issues to speak of. So I'm wondering how much of a challenge is the balkanization, if you will, of the long history of the different regions going to impact the urbanization, because you can't move from point A to point B because you may not know the language, or there may be cultural impediments and other sorts of barriers like that.
Yeah. So
can I suggest that this be the last question, please? I know all of you want to ask a lot of questions. I'm sure Richard will be here. During the coffee break, you can talk to him. So let's make this the last question if you want. Thank you.
Okay, so you're absolutely right. The point I'm saying that 18% GDP will continue from agricultural sector, but what we are saying is, can we find alternate employment for people in the rural sector to do other things other than till the land? And also when you look at migration of population, you take Punjab, which is one of the most, which is North India, which is right on the, in North India. It is one of the most productive from an agricultural point of view. the labor that they employ, so the challenge in that state is very different. So all those guys own those lands, they're rich farmers. They've employed labor from these poor states like UP, Bihar. They come there and work on their things. And these guys got nothing to do. They've got into drugs. So that state has a huge problem, because suddenly you have these rich farmers who own these huge tracts of land and they've got no work to do, so they are got onto drugs and the labor which is getting out there. So I think the point is, instead of migrating the labor to the cities, can we not find get certain activities done there from which they can get gainful employment, and not just we have to get them off the land, basically. Get them off that earning of that land. The 60% is on that 18%. So how do you actually reduce it? And America is a great example. I was reading that and saying it is fantastic. And it took you 100 years, but India needs to start somewhere on that. We have not even started there on that. So it is a challenge. Migration is a challenge. Cultural is a challenge. It is, and then of course the politics of it all, because the governments want to stay in power. They're very careful of how they treat different communities. They are their vote banks. Because please understand, people like Vijay and me do not make a difference to which party is going to come into the center. It's that guy, that 60% guy, who's going to make the difference, who's going to go. So they have to look after that constituency so that they get elected back into the government. That's politics again for you. Thank you very much, and really appreciate Vijay for inviting me here.
So, on behalf of everyone here, all our LEI friends, I thank Richard for making time. It has been a fantastic and very insightful presentation from him, as always. And thank you, Richard. Thank you for making time. And I'm sure many of you may want to ask you questions during the coffee break. If you have time to stay for a few minutes, everyone. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
So thank you also from my side. We will have now a tea and coffee break, and we'll continue at 11.
Okay, I think we're ready to start our next session, which will be by Alan Ritchie. Alan.
Do I have a clicker here that I can use? No, I don't think there's anything on here. Excellent. So this just backwards and forwards. Okay, great. So I know most of the people in this room, but for those that I guess at the first conference that I didn't get a chance to chat with last night, I'm Alan Ritchie from Toronto. I'm the managing partner of Loopster Nixon in Toronto. I'm very excited to be here in India, and thanks to Vijay and to Prashant and the rest of the Lexigen team for putting this together. Having just hosted the conference in May, all of us in Toronto have a real profound respect for what it takes to put this together, and you guys have done an excellent job so far. I appreciate the opportunity that I have today to try and share some thoughts with this group on law firm collaboration. So this is a picture of Harvard University, and this is where the idea for this presentation came from. Back in March of 2016, I was at the closing dinner following a program there called the Accelerated Leadership Program, which is really on business management for law firms. And I was lucky enough to be seated beside Dr. Heidi Gardner, who's the co-chair of the Center on the Legal Profession at Harvard, which is a think tank really dedicated to studying law firm management, the kind of place that I'm sure Jim Perkins will end up running someday. Dr. Gardner and I got a chance to discuss her research, which was on collaboration in law firms, and she was in the middle of probably the most ambitious data-driven research project on law firm collaboration that's ever been undertaken. And she was previewing some of the findings that she had, and I found them incredibly interesting. And we were talking about how her research might apply to law firm networks like LEI as opposed to sort of captive firms. And after a couple of glasses of wine, I was sort of convinced that this research would be an interesting topic for us at LEI, so here we are. Dr. Gardner's research comes from a much larger group of professors at Harvard who specialize in studying collaboration. Harvard Business School has been leading the way in studying both the economic and strategic benefits of collaboration for decades. Countless studies have been done across a number of different industries, all generally arriving at the same conclusion, that collaboration, when it's done right, results in both an increase in positive business culture and is very positive to the bottom line. And Dr. Gardner's research really builds on that foundation and the work of this man, who's Dr. Morten Hansen. Morten Hansen was the co-author of a book called Great by Choice, which was co-authored by him and Jim Collins, which has become one of the best selling business strategy books of all time. And his work is really phenomenal. He wrote a book that you should all buy and read that is conspicuously titled Collaboration. And it's essentially a consolidation of all the best research to date on collaboration strategy. But like most corporate strategy scholarship that's out there, it really focuses on top-down, CEO-led organizations, and the advice in it is difficult to graft onto the more flat leadership structures that we're used to in professional services firms and law firms. And this is where Heidi Gardner comes in. So Dr. Gardner's work, while not entirely unique in the business world, is unique when it comes to its application to law firms. The research that I discussed with her in the spring of 2016 was finally completed and released in a book that was published at the end of 2017, which has gone on to become a bestseller, which is probably more impressive based on how narrow the industry focus is that it had enough uptake to become a best-selling book. In the research that she did, she had unprecedented access to hundreds of law firms' raw accounting data. So they just gave her everything that they had, including timekeeper information, anonymized descriptions of the nature of client matters, and she conducted thousands of detailed surveys with law firm partners and law firms of all sizes across all geographies, and then led a team of data scientists to try and figure out how the existing scholarship on collaboration that Morten Hansen and his teams have done applies to the law firm environment. So my goal today is to try and provide a very high-level summary of her findings and then make some guesses as to how we as members of Law Exchange might apply some of this knowledge. So what does collaboration mean in terms of the type of work that Dr. Gardner and her team were studying? I think it's helpful to frame the question in the negative and try and start by showing what collaboration is not. In this context, collaboration is not delegation of work down to a lower cost junior lawyer, and it's not simply passing on a client to another lawyer within your firm. While those are important parts of our business, it's not the type of work that we're looking at in this context. We're also not talking about simply referring work to another firm in another jurisdiction or with another specialty beyond the scope of our firm's expertise. And then finally, we're not talking about cross-selling. Cross-selling was kind of the magical elixir of law firm consultants years ago, and after a decade or so of trying to push lawyers to cross-sell their firm's services to clients, we've learned that A, lawyers hate doing it because it makes them feel like salesmen, and B, sophisticated clients hate it. Client survey data shows that when we attempt to simply cross-sell, this is how our clients sort of perceive us. So if we're not talking about delegation, and we're not talking about referrals, and we're certainly not talking about cross-selling, what are we talking about when we mean collaboration? So Dr. Gardner's research defined collaboration as times when lawyers integrate their individual specialized expertise in order to deliver high-quality, customized outcomes on complex issues, when they team up to develop an innovative approach to a thorny issue, or when they rely on an expert from a different domain who can efficiently transport a solution across an industry rather than reinventing a solution from scratch. So this is really high-end interdisciplinary work or inter-practice area work where practice groups are collaborating, and this is really the focus of the work that they undertook. What does this mean for LEI? really we're talking about when the referring lawyer stays involved in a file. We're not just punting something off to another jurisdiction. The original lawyer is involved, and we're becoming something that is more than the sum of our parts. While referrals are always appreciated and they're a big part of what brings us to LEI, increasing opportunities for this higher type of collaborative work should, I think, be one of the aspirational goals of LEI long term. And when we look at this type of collaboration from the client perspective, there's a few quotes that I've pulled from Dr. Gardner's research that I think would be helpful. This one's from Jennifer Daniels, who's the head of the legal team at Colgate, so we can assume she spends a lot of money on legal services. She says that the reality is that the nature of business has changed sufficiently such that work is more complex, more dispersed, and more global. And as a result, we're often not looking for the advice of just one lawyer with one set of expertise. I'm looking for the advice of many lawyers across a spectrum of jurisdictions and issues, and that puts a real premium on collaboration. So she captures what we mean when we say collaborative work in this context. When it comes to interdisciplinary work, there's an understanding that this work is high value, clients are willing to pay for it, and that they expect us to collaborate. This is a quote from a chief legal officer of a global bank, and in that quote she says, 2 of my top law firms also have major practices serving the big pharmaceutical and aerospace companies, 2 of the most highly regulated industries on the planet. Why don't they send out one of those partners to tell me how to survive under these regulatory pressures? If they did, I'd give them hours to explain how they might help me, which almost certainly would lead to more work. Indeed, the kind of work that really matters, where I'm less price sensitive. Otherwise, I'll probably just put the regulatory work out in an RFP and let them bid against each other. In the end, I'll get what I need, but it's pathetic that I'm the one who has to push them to talk to their own colleagues. So this individual is a bit more aggressive, but the message is still clear. Clients want this type of collaborative approach when it's warranted, and they're willing to pay for it. And also, they're frustrated when they don't get it. Another one coming from a Fortune 500 general counsel who says, I'm deeply suspicious of people who purport to know everything. The best people are those who know what they don't know and how to get help when they need it. I want lawyers who, when they don't know the answer, diligently apply themselves towards finding people who do not or who do know it, and then proceed to work with them in productive ways. So this quote, I think, demonstrates that when you don't collaborate across practice areas, you can create credibility and trust issues with your client. So the bottom line of all of this is that our clients want us to collaborate, and we're at risk if we don't. So we know that our clients would like us to collaborate, but what's in it for us? In short, a heck of a lot. After the years of research that she pulled together and millions of data points and thousands of lawyer surveys, the research found that collaboration resulted in increased revenue, increased quality of work, increased client loyalty, happier lawyers, and ultimately increased profit. So I'm going to look at these results with a bit more granularity. So this graph, which is probably difficult to see, but shows average revenue per client on the vertical axis, and then number of practice groups along the horizontal axis. It contrasts revenue results of 3 major law firms when between 1 and 5 practice groups work together on projects for clients within a given year. Not sort of single issue type work. This is collaborative work where more than one practice group is involved in similar files. For firm number 1 on this list, revenues tripled when 2 practice groups are involved rather than 1. As each additional practice group is added, each individual practice group earns more on average. So even the incumbent practices earn more when they add an additional practice group together. So financially, it's a complete win-win. The explanation here is that the cross-practice group work allows you to not only get more total work, but also move up the food chain in terms of the quality and access premium fees, because interdisciplinary work is more complex, and complexity demands higher margins. This is an interesting graph because it shows collaboration versus cross-selling. So the sort of red line along the bottom shows the effect of adding just incremental practice groups where the relationship is kind of linear, where each practice group adds its own level of revenue, versus the sort of bars in there that shows revenue per client as 5, 6, and 7 different disciplines become involved in each of the client matters. So we're talking about getting access to collaborative client engagements. As more practice groups collaborate on these engagements, the average annual revenue from the client increases exponentially over and above that which each practice group would have earned providing discrete services. So another way of saying this is that one client receiving integrated services involving 3 or 4 practice groups produces exponentially more revenue than 3 or 4 clients each receiving discrete single line services. And this pattern held true in the research across the full spectrum of sizes of firm and firm geographies. This data set's really interesting for LEI in that it studies within law firms the number of jurisdictions that are involved in certain files. So these are firms that have international offices, but I think it holds true and has some application to LEI. It demonstrates a strong correlation between revenue growth and the growth in the number of jurisdictions that service clients in a given year. And the key takeaway here is that each additional international office that became involved in a client's matters not only added the incremental additional revenue from that new jurisdiction, but it also had the effect of increasing the revenue generated in the home jurisdiction. So this is very important to us as law exchange members, given that we're economically independent and there's no direct short-term economic benefit to us involving other firms in our jurisdiction. But this data, I think, permits us to make the inference that in the long run, seeking opportunities to collaborate with member firms in other jurisdictions will have the effect of increasing our domestic revenue from the same clients. This one looks at rate discounts. So the fear is that as you start growing revenue from a client, then they've got the ability to exert rate pressure on you. And to a certain extent, that's true. What the data shows here from one US law firm, but it's representative across the whole data set that they studied, was essentially that as a firm adds practice lines to a client offering, there's a slight increase in the percentage discount that clients demand, but that discount tends to peak at 6% and then drops back down as you continue to add additional practices based on the fact that is a more complex client over time, and then reverts back to an average of just under 4% versus your rack rate. So the solo specialists are going to look at this data as an argument that any discount relative to their single line specialty service is unacceptable. However, I think in the context of the potential for exponential growth in revenue per client, most of us would be willing to sacrifice 3 or 4% from our clients if they were willing to increase total revenue by a multiple of 5 or 6. Finally, when we look at profitability, kind of the amalgam of all of these other metrics, the data set shows that not only do we exponentially increase revenue when we're able to serve clients with cross-practice group needs, but that profit per client increases as well. So it's not just revenue and kind of a race to the bottom on profitability. I think the key takeaway from this data is whether it's the number of practice areas involved in client engagements or increasing the number of jurisdictions involved in serving clients, that the effect is not simply additive, it's exponential in terms of its effect on revenue and growth. There's also a substantial risk management benefit that they've uncovered to increasing the number of practice leaders who are involved in servicing a client's needs. So the client survey data that they obtained show that in cases where there's a single relationship partner, over 1/4 or 28% of the clients would go ahead and seek a new firm in the event that their client partner left the firm. And we contrast this with just 10% when more than one partner is involved in a relationship. And the loyalty effect becomes even greater when the relationship partners are from different practice areas. So if we think of the lateral hiring market, when a key team leaves a firm, they tend to be functional practice teams that lift out from firm A to go get paid a substantial guarantee to move that same practice team over to firm B. And it would be very rare for a cross-disciplinary practice group to lift out in the same manner and go to another firm. So in summary, your multi-practice clients and multi-practice relationship teams make client relationships much more sticky and make practice teams much less likely to be able to lift out their team and walk and take the client relationships with them. So it all begs the question that if collaboration itself is so valuable, why don't we do it very well as lawyers? So I think this is the most important part of the research. The economics are somewhat intuitive. If you do more high-value work from clients, there's a good business case for it. But lawyers are also not very good at doing the collaborative work. So they tried to get to the bottom of this, and I think this is the piece that gives us some ideas about what we can do going forward. So through the hundreds of surveys or thousands of surveys and the thousands of hours of interviews that she did with law firm partners and correlating that with kind of partner performance. So she knew who really she was talking to, whether they were high performers, low performers, whether they were good at collaboration or not. Their goal was to try and identify common themes that would emerge both structurally and culturally that would get in the way of the type of collaboration that we're looking to create. So they identified 6 broad barriers to collaboration that they refer to as inefficiency, what they call competence trust, interpersonal trust, the inability of colleagues to handle the breadth of services across a broad range of business issues, what they call the politics of leadership, and compensation barriers. So I'm going to try to unpack these each a little bit. So here are some quotes drawn from our survey showing the sentiment that I think most of us can empathize with here, where lawyers say, working on my own is a quicker alternative. The involvement of too many people can sometimes result in duplication and lack of decision making. Our clients are really different, so we have to adapt their expectations about response times, terminology, even formatting. It might sound trivial, but when you try to deliver a joined up approach, there's a real tussle about who's right. And then one response was, I went to law school so that I could tackle sophisticated legal issues. If I wanted to manage teams, I would have gotten an MBA. So people are really worried about this issue of inefficiency, and I think it's a real concern. The next one is competence. People are worried about who they're going to refer their work to and whether they're really going to put that client relationship at risk. So the trust barrier there is essentially, can I trust the partner that I bring into my client relationship that they won't screw up that relationship? As lawyers, we have difficulty assessing the competence of lawyers who are outside of our own scope of expertise, and I think we've got a tendency to make assumptions that any uncertainty will generally be resolved negatively. Client relationships are very difficult to build, and we're often very protective of the relationships because we know that they're fragile. If one of our partners or one of our member firms let us down, we fear that it won't only impact the success of that engagement, but will impact the overall relationship with the client and have future ramifications. And the survey responses all had that common theme, that a client lawyer often would rather have a smaller, limited relationship with a client than would be possible in a collaborative approach, rather than take the risk that a partner or colleague will let them down. While these behaviors are not in the long-term best interest of the firm, the lawyer's fears are quite rational. The data confirm that when an engagement goes poorly, it's not just the lawyer who underperforms that's impacted. The entire law firm is less likely to get future work in the future. So it's rational to have those fears. The other issues are around interpersonal trust, and that was a major concern, particularly as we got into looking at larger firms, and that can be understood because there's less social connection among the lawyers. Because client relationships are difficult to build, and we're wary of another partner upstaging us or somehow disintermediating us from the relationship, we're concerned. These trust problems become exacerbated as a group becomes larger and more distributed across geography and culture. I think that's important for LEI, and I think we lose sight of it, given that the people in this room all have very deep bonds of professional respect and personal friendship that have been built through conferences like this, where we've spent a lot of time together. But if we take a step back and we think about the 2,000 lawyers who are back at the office right now, working diligently on client matters, and an opportunity arises for international collaboration, for that lawyer, they're likely to be referred to an LEI lawyer that they've never met, that they haven't spoken to, that they're coming into a different business culture with nothing but the endorsement from one of us that this person's good for them. So while the endorsement helps in terms of bringing that trust level down, from the perspective of that lawyer, it doesn't really go the full way. So I think as gatekeepers, we need to recognize this barrier as pretty formidable in our organization. There's also real concerns that lawyers had where they expressed a high degree of anxiety when being asked to delve outside of their area of expertise and into the realm of understanding the broader business issues that are facing their client. Lawyers are uncomfortable having open-ended meetings with one-question agendas, such as what's keeping you up at night, We're much more comfortable staying within our technical area of expertise because it's safe and low risk. But unfortunately, the curiosity about broader business issues is required in order to identify the opportunities for collaboration. Collaboration requires a genuine interest in the client's business and overarching objectives, and requires that you be comfortable having these conversations. If we're not comfortable venturing into the broader business discussions, we'll be unlikely to see the opportunities, and we'll be stuck reverting back to cross-selling, which I think is where we want to avoid. The other problem that we have is that lawyers are reluctant or unable to identify collaboration opportunities because they have a poor understanding of where their colleagues really excel. It's not enough to simply identify the cross-practice group issue. You need to understand how your lawyer's skill or your firm's skill or some other member firm's skill graphs and maps onto that need. And the research shows that most of the partners know less about their own firm's offerings than the public could uncover from a website search. So that's sad in some sense, that the website is able to give the public more knowledge about the service offering that a firm has. It's not enough to say to a client, I'm not sure if we have expertise in that particular area, I'll get back to you. That really doesn't inspire confidence in the client. You need advanced knowledge about your firm's full spectrum of services and the opportunities so that you can notice the opportunity for collaboration, be ready to speak to it when that opportunity comes around. So I think this is a very real barrier for LEI, because we're so many firms with such wide-ranging expertise and unique talents spread all over the world that it would be an incredible or almost impossible undertaking to try and understand both the technical expertise and unique industry experience spread around this room and then distributed back to the thousands of lawyers that are sitting in our home office. They also identified that value-added collaboration involves really delicate power dynamics. So most senior lawyers are accustomed to delegating to junior lawyers in their own group, whose skill set is similar, although less developed, and whose advancement depends on pleasing that partner. So we're very comfortable with those sort of military chain of command type relationships, but we're less accustomed to coordinating peers across departments. And this type of collaboration requires real peer-to-peer work with senior lawyers with unclear leadership roles. And this, in many ways, is sort of the inverse of what we were talking about with interpersonal trust, where interpersonal trust is about me being suspicious of whether or not you're going to disintermediate me from the relationship. The issue around politics is more the fact that we've got a long-standing relationship, we've got this professional respect, now we're going to collaborate in something where I may need to criticize you, I may need to correct your process, and that makes us all very, very uncomfortable. And for the most part, the survey showed that even though a partner was underperforming in a collaborative task, the partner that recognized the underperformance would rather allow the client relationship to become damaged than engage in that negative discussion with their partners. So that's really a problem. Collaboration is going to require honest and direct communication, and the potential for awkward conversations is going to make lawyers reluctant to involve team members where the power balance or the hierarchy is unclear. But it's exactly these types of efforts that are required in order to try and unlock those economic benefits of collaboration that we talked about earlier. Obviously, compensation barriers are there. This is not surprising, but I think what was surprising was the fact that they weren't as fundamental or weren't top of mind. They weren't the highest priority barrier to collaboration that was out there. The best compensation systems won't be able to guarantee collaboration, but obviously poorly designed ones will just kill it outright. This is something that we're dealing with at Loopster Nixon right now, actually. So Ian and I have had many spirited discussions about this stuff. Compensation can reinforce these individualistic, anti-collaborative approaches where someone says, I'm the star, and the rest is sort of a band backing me up. Poorly designed compensation systems are really bad for culture, and they're toxic to collaboration. As we know, rainmakers are crucial, but if they can't produce, if they have no team willing to work for them, they're not able to really do anything. So, and as firms, we're very reluctant, I think, to play with compensation because of the butterfly effect, the idea that a very small change in compensation would have much larger unintended implications in the long run. So we don't like tinkering with any system that's proven to be stable. and we know that if we measure behaviors, we're going to get exactly what we measure, probably in abundance and probably to a much larger degree than we were anticipating. So, we want to be very careful with what we do on compensation. So in the time I've been standing here, I hope I've identified two things. One, the type of collaboration that Gardner and her team are talking about is accretive to the firm on many, many levels, if and when it's done right. And that two, it's really hard and it's sometimes risky. So let's see if we can start to provide some guidance to those of us brave enough to take on the risks of trying to become more collaborative firms. So in terms of decreasing inefficiency, we need to get the right resources on our team. We need to launch the project effectively at the outset. Contributors on the project need to be gotten up to speed very fast. Client preferences need to be part of the initial onboarding discussion. Rather than just jump into the substantive subject matter, you should take a step back and talk about what your clients are looking for out of that. We need to communicate responsiveness expectations. Let's all have the difficult conversations up front with other lawyers so that we minimize the impact of those discussions later on. Seek disclosure from team members on constraints or commitments that could impact their ability to contribute. That's something that I think is very easy to ask at the outset. If someone's got a vacation coming up, or if someone's got childcare responsibilities who's collaborating with you, it's really helpful to know what those are up front. And as you can imagine, a client is much more understanding if they've felt those expectations or those have been passed along to them. This is a typical graph that I think Harvard uses in almost every book that they publish that basically says initially collaboration is very hard, and that the worst thing you can do is kind of give up on it while you start through the process, because over time collaboration gets easier, the time and costs involved in becoming a more collaborative organization come down and the benefits go up. But you can imagine if you only work your way partially through becoming a collaborative organization, you can miss out on the benefits and just be stuck with the costs. So how do we build trust in each other's competence? So first and foremost, we've got to make sure that we've got quality control and quality assurance in our organization. I think that a lot of the large firms that have undergone major mergers have done so without having any opportunity to really do in-depth analysis of the quality of lawyers that they've brought on, and that's bred a lot of distrust among large firm lawyers that the newly acquired firms really have the expertise, and they're reluctant to refer it to people that they don't know. We don't have that in our organization as much because we haven't been exposed to that many large mergers, but I still think we've got a lot to do in making sure that we've got a legitimate and recognized quality assurance program. I know we've got protocols in place, but those are very important, obviously, to ensuring that quality along the whole organization matters. We should be seeking out honest brokers within our firm or our network. I think we're very, very good at that. There's certain members around the firm that are sort of the first reach out to people, even if it's not for a recommendation in their own jurisdiction, to try and find a place where we're going to get referred to something that is, we can rely on the quality that we're going to get. One of the interesting things that they said is to try and increase your happiness with the competence is to often look at more junior team members for collaboration, people that have the skill set but whose plates aren't necessarily full. There's a tendency just to go to your recognized practice leaders who are often overburdened and don't have the ability to meet your responsiveness objectives. Even though they've got the recognized skill set, you're going to be disappointed on their ability to really dig in on the issue. I think as law firm leaders too, when we have a positive experience, whether it's with another member firm or whether it's with people in our own firm, we've got a responsibility really to share that. And we can't be afraid of collaborating outside of the firm. The data set that we looked at showed that collaboration of any kind is going to increase revenues within the domestic firm, even if you're sending out that collaborative work, or even if you're collaborating with somebody who may be outside of your own firm. So even that is not a zero-sum kind of relationship. It's an accretive thing if you can bring in someone from another firm. In order to build the interpersonal trust, I think this is entirely a cultural thing. We need to remember that human beings need repeated, safe interactions before they'll truly trust people. And we need to do all that we can to try and facilitate these interactions in our organization. So we need to be a bit deliberate about the social environments that we create. It's important to remember that quality character attracts quality character. So we need to remember when hiring and setting criteria for advancement, there should be no compromise on integrity and trust, no matter how lucrative the economic opportunity might be. Care should be taken with new lawyers and laterals to ensure that sufficient and deliberate efforts are made to build trusted relationships. And we need to try and include formal and informal trust building exercises throughout the firm, throughout the year, to continue to build this interpersonal trust. And we also need to recognize that the long-term economics of building this trusted relationship, even if they're going to impact our short-term personal or financial gain. So as firm leaders, we should be speaking openly about the importance of trust and integrity as key firm values. It's really important that the tone at the top is set and that these things are top of mind. If the people in this room, they're the ones who other lawyers are going to look to in order to decide how safe the corporate culture is in your own firm. And what we do as leaders is exactly what our firms are going to become over time. How do we build sort of business breadth? In order to do that, we've got to have our lawyers develop an appreciation beyond technical skills so that we can have, the bigger picture view of what's facing our clients' business. We need to ask clients how they stay on top of their industry, what periodicals they read, what trade groups are involved in, and then we need to immerse ourselves in their world. So that we can really see the opportunities there for collaboration rather than just trying to cross-sell what we know is our services. And what we've found and what the data indicates is that clients generally are very willing to share when genuine interest is shown in their business, provided it's without a short-term cross-selling incentive. So again, you've got to be very careful that the interest is genuine. It's about opening up a dialogue, not about trying to get your tax guy or your environmental lawyer in there to sell additional services. We need to ensure that junior lawyers in our firms understand that building legal skills is not enough. Young lawyers need to start building industry expertise early on, so that by the time they're ready to be front and center on a client relationship, they've got that ability and they've been doing that for years. And most importantly, I think, is that you can't fake it. You need to have a genuine interest in and genuine curiosity in your client's business. And if you can't find that genuine curiosity, then you're probably servicing the wrong industry and find something else to do. What should firms do to try and increase awareness of their own practice areas? As firm leaders, we need to become the champions and seek opportunities to highlight each other's wins and successes to get that knowledge out to people within our firm. They recommend that we should be considering formal and regular programs of internal marketing and promotion of the practice teams within the firm, not just taking all of our efforts to promote the practice groups externally. We've got to be doing that internally as well. And when we're onboarding new lawyers and staff, we should include extensive efforts for cross-practice group interaction and orientation. I think most of us now make a lot of efforts to build connections within practice groups, but it's likely we aren't doing enough to build those relationships across practice groups to try and encourage collaboration. In order to minimize the negative impact of collaboration politics, I think that it's important that we all speak openly about the roles and responsibilities of people and people on a project at the outset. If we want to be collaborative leaders, we need to be prepared to provide timely and direct feedback and to intervene and diffuse team conflicts. And I think firm leadership really has the responsibility to create and promote a safe environment for these kinds of conversations to occur. I think that we've got a responsibility to tell our lawyers, look, when a partner comes to talk to another partner about criticizing their work, it's, we got to take that as constructive. We need to make a safe environment to actually get that feedback, so that the reaction starts to become less negative and hopefully can become more productive. In terms of compensation, I think that what they found was that compensation mattered more when it was the lawyer's only way to judge their worth within the firm. The best firms that they studied provided abundant psychological and social rewards, which tried to de-emphasize the primacy of compensation to take away that slice. If you overemphasize origination, that becomes counter-collaborative, as we can imagine. And if you get the balance wrong, partners will shy away from doing collaboration. One of the things that they recommended was to consider rewarding origination for a time-limited period, or requiring substantial ongoing involvement in order to maintain origination credit. So getting away from just the kind of sales commission on bringing it in the door, rewarding that long-term client maintenance. One interesting thought was making origination credit more available for a collaborative origination than a lone wolf origination. So in that scenario, maybe someone's getting 10 points if they bring in a piece of work, but if they go and they do something collaboratively and I work with a partner of mine to bring in a piece of work together, there might be 15 points available in the collaboration metrics in those scenarios to try and encourage people to bring people onto their team. And we're not talking about a zero-sum situation with origination credit. So I think there's that data, but I think we also have some additional special barriers as LEI. One, we've got more cultural and language barriers than single office firms or domestic firms. And I think that those barriers have the potential to really exacerbate information and expectation asymmetries within our group, particularly among lawyers who will be collaborating who aren't regular attendees of the meeting. I think we've got a challenge in that right now the relationships in our organization are predominantly top to top. We've got managing partners, executive committee members that really are coming together, and we haven't established these laddered relationships that would go right down to the people that are actually going to be doing the work and collaborating together, although there's a lot of things that we've got on the go with that objective in mind. The other thing that we have is that we don't have the same compensation incentives when we're referring work back and forth, and I think that's a double-edged sword for our organization because we're not going to be burdened by a problematic compensation system that doesn't reward referrals or collaboration correctly, but we also don't have that tool to use to try and encourage these behaviors. We can't use compensation as a real benefit to our collaboration efforts. So what should be our objectives then for LEI? I think from my perspective, one, we need to confirm our faith in the benefits of collaboration. We should make sure that we reaffirm that this is a value that we want to have, that we want to be collaborating with each other to the extent that we can when the opportunities present itself, and that despite the fact that there are barriers out there, that it's worth doing. We also need to, I think, acknowledge these barriers and continue to try and chip away at them over time to try and create a more safe environment for collaboration among the firms. We need to be setting objectives to try and increase trust of all kinds throughout our firm and well beyond the gatekeepers. And a lot of the things that we've got going on now as initiatives, I think, are driven by trying to increase that trust and relationship through our organizations. And then finally, our lawyers need to be seeking opportunities to engage in collaborative work when the opportunities present themselves. So we need to make sure that not only the people in this room, but the people back at the office understand how to spot collaborative opportunities and are able to bring the best of LEI to the table. So given all of that, I've put together kind of some concrete ideas, a lot of which are already underway within LEI, and some are just examples meant to prompt a broader dialogue on collaboration in general. So one of the things that I thought that we might experiment with is what we've done around this room, which is speed dating, but a sort of different form of moderated speed dating, where you may have one of the LEI gatekeepers volunteer to reach out to two different third-party firms and force kind of a dialogue between them. People that wanted to participate, wanted to build connections, could put together a 15 to 20-minute introductory video call between two practice areas that could have a very simple agenda, where one practice group would be presenting to another practice group, moderated by someone who's very familiar with LEI who can set that up. It's done over video conference so that you get that interpersonal connection that we sort of get here, although not in a perfect form. It's better than just being on a conference call, with a simple 20-minute agenda where each practice group or each lawyer on both sides of that call talks about who they are, what sort of work they do, describes an exciting engagement, what skill set and technical expertise are you most proud of, and then you leave the call with nothing but an encouragement for further contact and collaboration with the client. The objective there is just to begin developing both competence and interpersonal trust through increased contact and increased safe contact among LEI members long before the opportunity for collaboration arises. The idea is that if we share knowledge over time, we're going to decrease the awareness gap that we have in our organization's service offering and expertise. This is something that the executive committee has really pushed, particularly in terms of the regional meetings that we have, is to try and focus on increasing the depth of participation from our firms, particularly at the regional meetings, trying to push the under 40 initiative that we've adopted, where I think we had a budget put aside to pay the conference attendance fees for partners who may be under 40. I think we've only had one take us up on it in the year that it's been in place, but that's something that, again, is to try and create the laddering within the organization to increase trust and familiarity. We need to encourage, I think, more opportunities for lawyers to participate in LEI in some way between the meetings. And I don't really know what that is, but I think that LEI over time needs to find a way to become a year-long organization. And really what we're trying to do is fill that 6-month gap and involve more people than are involved in the relationships currently. This is something that Maggie's going to talk about tomorrow, so I won't steal her thunder, but really, moving lawyers to other offices for a short period of time, there's no cost involved to having someone go and work in the other office other than, giving them a hotel and a ticket to go to that firm. So firms that collaborate across regions could very easily send one lawyer to another firm with the only objective to be that they go out for lunch with a couple lawyers there, get to know some people, and build that connection. I also think that that's really a low-cost way to reward some of your top-performing younger lawyers. I know if we, in our firm, went to some of our junior partners and said, hey, would you like to go spend a week in San Diego, or would you like to go spend a week in Raleigh? And all you got to do is meet some lawyers. From our perspective, that person's going to continue to work remotely. They're going to continue to generate revenue, and they're going to start generating, they start building relationships. And all we're asking out of the firm in Raleigh in that case is, can you give them a desk and an internet connection for 5 days and buy them a sandwich? So, I think that's one opportunity. I think it's really important that we continue to focus our quality assurance programs, and that continues to be something that is very paramount in our organization. It needs to be seen as legitimate. The process that we have, the protocol that we have, has to be seen as something that we continually use to try and reduce the level of competence trust issues that may arise from people that don't have that personal relationship within LEI. We also need to communicate the existence of our quality assurance program to lawyers not super familiar with the organization. This is something, I think there's great things going on in terms of social media right now. The work that Kate and Christian have done has been awesome in terms of communication within the network. For those of you that don't see what they're doing on LinkedIn right now, it's phenomenal. For those that don't read Soundbite, I think it's important to try and get that out to people within your firm, explain what it is, even though in some cases Soundbite's going directly to individual lawyers within your firms. People are going to pay attention to it a little bit more if there's a little explanatory note that comes from the managing partner saying, hey guys, check out the latest edition of Soundbite, something that sort of increases its relevance. And I think that we should be using that medium to try and maybe profile a firm in every given month. It would be a very easy process to push out the typical questionnaire to a firm in order to generate their own client profile that we would then publish in Soundbite, with a goal again of trying to constantly break down these barriers to understanding what it is that we do, what our level of expertise is, trusting in that expertise well in advance of the opportunity coming up for collaboration with our clients. The other thing that we may want to consider doing is having LEI members nominate rising stars in their organization. We could go around the room and ask everyone to nominate one of their top junior lawyers and then publish a list and some profiles once a year as a way to really, give something back, something that moves away from compensation being the primary objective, and also teaches us who the next generation of people are that we want to get involved in LEI, and that we can identify those in a very meaningful way. And I think all of this stuff is really becoming easier. So when I hear the stories, we've only been involved in LEI for I think 5 or 6 years now, but when I hear all the stories about what's been tried and failed, I sort of think, yeah, but you haven't tried it now with the new technology that we have now, with the ease of connecting people that we have now. And I don't think just because some initiative may have been difficult or unsuccessful back 10 or 15 years ago, that we shouldn't look at it again in a new paradigm and say, could this work better now with video conferences? Could this work better now with GoToMeeting and the ability to share things easier across jurisdictions? And like anything, we need to measure our goals, and we need to measure these things so that we can actually decide whether or not they're going to be successful. I think that's important in any initiative. When you start measuring something, that allows us to get feedback. And that, I think, on the LinkedIn and the e-marketing front, it's incredible what Kate and Christian have done in that, as members of the EC, we all get reports every month about who's looking at our website and are we increasing traffic to that website. And it allows us really to start moving up the food chain in terms of increasing that quality, because we have the data, which, in terms of marketing data 5-6 years ago, we just wouldn't have been able to know. We wouldn't have been able to ever measure our success. So these are sort of a summary of the objectives that I have. But if anyone's got any questions, either on the research that was sort of the basis for this, I think the book is phenomenal. You guys should buy it. You should read it. Or if anyone's got any questions on sort of the recommendations or thinks I've got it wrong in terms of how it applies to LEI, I'm more than happy to chat about that. Fred.
Just 2 questions. One, can you send that PowerPoint to the group?
Sure. Yeah.
And is that able to be published on LinkedIn?
I think so. I mean, I gave them all credit at the front of the presentation. I'm not purporting that the research is my own. Yeah. So I don't think there's any issue with putting it out there. It's properly attributed.
Great. So I think you hit the nail on the head with identifying and giving some ideas for reducing the barriers to collaboration. Just a couple other things that I think are really easy to do and very helpful for me when I'm trying to make clients more comfortable with who are these foreigners, is testimonials. We have a lot of referrals going back and forth. We probably don't identify as many as there actually exist, but when they're really good success stories, and there are a number of them, 1, say thank you to the person. 2, put it on the website, and we have a testimonial section. We have Soundbite, as people know. We have LinkedIn, as people know. Sent these to clients. Just saying, look, here's, we had a great referral to well, I'm not going to point anybody, but, to several. That's just made a lot of people comfortable. So, as they say in Texas, it ain't bragging if you can do it. And we should just exalt those sort of things. They're easy to do, and it ties into quality assurance. It will give people a lot of. It's not just for external. It's not just for external marketing. It's also for internal marketing within our firms.
Yeah, and I think I agree entirely. And I think one of the things that sometimes we forget is that when we hear people sort of grumble about I haven't gotten any referrals here and there, the question that should be coming to our mind is are those firms, are those people, are we doing enough internally to try and market within LEI? The people that are going to be submitting the testimonials and the referrals and that are actively trying to break down these barriers are likely going to be the ones that get those opportunities to collaborate because they've done all the work in advance to minimize some of these barriers, so that when the opportunity comes up, it's a much more fluid process to involve them in your file, because they know what you do, they know who you are, they know about your firm's expertise, because you've done the work in advance to make sure that not only the people in this room know, but we've taken advantage of the other avenues that we have to get our message deeper into the 2,000 lawyers that think about LEI once every 6 months when they wonder why Alan Ritchie isn't in the office.
I mean, you mentioned a lot of great ideas, and in addition to the testimonials, we do 3 regional conferences per year, and they've been wildly successful. In the U.S., North America region, we've done this for the last 7 or 8 years. We just did in Chicago, we had 8 younger people come along, and so when you do your region, which is, to your point, just a fabulous way to indoctrinate the younger blood and have people know who are these, understand the group. It's not just Fred's folly, So I encourage people who who are hosting regional conferences to use that as a forum as well to bring along, younger people.
Yeah. I think the data that we have shows that we're doing a lot of things incredibly well. It's meant more maybe even to tie the fact that we're doing all these things and that they do match up to eliminating barriers to collaboration, and that we need to continue to commit to those things, continue to expand on those arrangements. Okay, well, if no one else has any other questions, I think what we'd like as an ask, though, is over the lunch, think about some of these things and try and have conversations about what you're comfortable with, and whether or not some of these ideas are things that you think you can roll out in your own organizations, or if there's new things that we haven't talked about, then by all means report back. So, thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Alan. That was really interesting. And now we're right on time, and we can go for lunch, and we'll be back at 1:30 and continue.